Wearing purple. You throw on a purple shirt, purple sneakers, maybe a purple jacket. Nobody bats an eye. It's just a color, right? But rewind 200 years, and that same outfit could get you executed. Not fined, not arrested, executed. Purple wasn't just a fashion choice back then. It was a symbol of power so serious that wearing it without permission was considered treason. The whole thing started with Roman emperors who made purple the ultimate status symbol. The dye came from sea snails, and it took roughly 12,000 of them to produce enough for a single garment. That made it insanely expensive, so only the ultra-wealthy could afford it. Emperors like Nero passed actual laws, saying only royalty could wear certain shades of purple. If you were a commoner caught wearing it, you weren't just breaking a fashion rule. You were impersonating royalty. In the Byzantine Empire, that meant death. Guards would inspect what people wore, and if you were draped in the wrong color, that was it. So next time you throw on that purple hoodie, remember someone would have killed you for that. Speaking against the government. You complain about politicians on Twitter. You rant about the government to your friends. You post memes mocking whoever's in charge. Completely normal, right? That's just Tuesday in a free country. But 200 years ago, that same complaint could get you hanged. Speaking against the government wasn't seen as free speech. It was treason. Across Europe, sedition laws made criticizing the monarchy a capital offense. In Britain, seditious libel laws meant if you badmouthed the king, you were done. France before the Revolution criticized the monarchy and you'd meet the guillotine. Even America, the land of freedom, had the Sedition Act of 1798 that made it illegal to speak against the government. The punishment wasn't just jail time. It was public execution, often preceded by torture. They'd hang you in the town square to make an example out of you. Today we have entire TV shows dedicated to mocking leaders. Your angry tweet about politicians? That's a privilege people literally died for. Being homeless. Being homeless today is a tragedy, a complex social issue that cities struggle to address. But 200 years ago, it was a criminal offense punishable by death. If you didn't have a home or a job, you weren't seen as someone who needed help. You were seen as a criminal. Vagrancy laws across Europe and early America made it illegal to be what they called idle and disorderly. The British Vagrancy Act of 1824 labeled homeless people as rogues and vagabonds, who could be imprisoned, publicly whipped, or even executed. Get caught a second time, you'd be transported to the colonies or hanged outright. Society didn't view poverty as a systemic problem. They viewed it as a moral failure. The homeless were seen as potential thieves, rebels, or threats to the social order. So instead of charity or assistance, they got a noose. Today we understand the causes. Back then, sleeping on a park bench could literally be your last nap. Criticizing your boss. You complain about your boss at lunch. You vent to coworkers about how terrible management is. Maybe you leave a brutal review on Glassdoor. Normal office behavior, right? But 200 years ago, if your boss was a landowner or member of the nobility, that criticism could get you killed. The feudal hierarchy was still alive and well in the 1800s, and masters had legal authority over their workers. Disrespect wasn't just rude, it was insubordination, and insubordination came with severe punishment. Servants who criticized aristocrats could be dismissed and blacklisted at minimum. In many regions, physical punishment was completely legal, but in extreme cases, speaking against a landowner could be twisted into sedition. The class system was rigid and violent, and your boss wasn't just your manager. They often held life and death authority over you. Today you can complain freely, maybe even get them fired. That snarky email to HR about your manager? You just survived something that used to be fatal. Being left-handed. You pick up a pen with your left hand and sign a document. Totally normal. About 10% of people are left-handed, and nobody thinks twice about it. But 200 years ago, using your left hand could get you accused of witchcraft and executed. Left-handedness was seen as a mark of the devil. The word sinister literally means left in Latin, and that's not a coincidence. People genuinely believed the left hand was the hand of Satan, a sign of demon possession or evil intent. Children caught using their left hand were beaten, their hands tied down, forced to use their right. But for adults, it was worse. Left-handedness was used as evidence in witch trials. If you were already suspected and happened to be left-handed, that was one more mark against you. Combined with other accusations, it could seal your fate. You'd be burned at the stake, hanged, or drowned. Today we know it's just brain hemisphere dominance. Back then, signing with your left hand made you a witch. Whistling on a ship, you whistle while you work. Maybe you hum a tune to pass the time. Harmless habit, right? Maybe a little annoying to your coworkers, but that's it. But whistle on a ship 200 years ago, and you could be flogged to death or thrown overboard. Sailors believed whistling summoned storms. They called it whistling up a wind, and they thought it would invite disaster at sea. Maritime superstitions weren't just beliefs. They were law aboard ships, and ship captains had absolute power once you left port. Maritime law allowed them to dish out extreme punishments for anything they considered a threat. Whistling was seen as challenging the captain's authority and tempting fate at the same time. You could be flogged with a cat o' nine tails for a first offense. Do it again, especially during a storm, they'd throw you overboard without a second thought. Superstition mixed with military discipline created a deadly combination. Today it just annoys your coworkers. On a ship in 1824, that tune gets you keel-hauled. Predicting the weather. You check your weather app. You tell someone it's going to rain tomorrow. You plan your weekend around the forecast. The most boring, mundane thing you do all week. But 200 years ago, claiming you could predict the weather could get you burned at the stake. Weather prediction was seen as witchcraft or heresy, because only God was supposed to control the weather. If you claimed you could predict it, you were claiming God's power, and that made you a servant of the devil. Witch trials included weather prediction as evidence of dark magic, but it got worse. People believed if you could predict bad weather, you must have caused it. Farmers accused of cursing crops. Sailors blamed for summoning storms, all because they made a prediction that came true. Even educated people who studied atmospheric patterns risked heresy charges. The punishment? Burning or hanging after a witch trial. Today, meteorology is just science. Back then, saying it might rain tomorrow was a confession that could get you burned alive. Eating meat on a Friday. You grab a burger on Friday, maybe a pepperoni pizza for lunch. Completely normal choice, nobody cares. But 200 years ago, eating meat on a Friday during Lent could get you executed for heresy. The Catholic Church had strict laws about Friday meat consumption, and they weren't suggestions. They were enforced with real legal power. Church courts could bring actual charges against you. And since the church and state worked together in most of Europe, defying church law meant defying civil law. If you were caught eating meat on Friday, especially during Lent, you'd face public penance at minimum. But repeat offenders, or anyone caught during the holiest periods, execution was on the table. The charge was heresy, defying God's law as interpreted by the church. They'd burn you at the stake, or hang you just like any other heretic. It wasn't until the 1960s that the Catholic Church relaxed these rules, so that pepperoni pizza on Friday, technically, you just committed heresy, punishable by death. Women wearing pants. A woman walks down the street in jeans, maybe a pantsuit for work, yoga pants to the gym, completely unremarkable. Nobody even notices. But 200 years ago, a woman wearing pants was a criminal act that could get you arrested, publicly humiliated, or worse. Anti-cross-dressing ordinances across Europe and America made it illegal for women to wear anything but dresses. Paris had a law requiring women to get police permission just to wear pants. In early 1900s America, women were arrested for wearing bloomers, loose pants designed for comfort. These weren't just suggestions, they were masquerading laws that treated women in pants as threats to the social order. The punishment ranged from arrests and fines to public shaming. In extreme cases, or when combined with other charges, execution was possible. Society saw it as women stepping out of their assigned role, and that was dangerous. Today women wear whatever they want. Back then, those yoga pants would have required a permit from the police, claiming the earth revolves around the sun. The earth revolves around the sun. Basic fact. Something you learn in elementary school. Something nobody questions. But say that out loud 200 years ago, and you could be burned at the stake for heresy. The Catholic Church taught geocentrism, the idea that Earth was the center of the universe. Contradicting that meant contradicting the Bible, and contradicting the Bible meant you were a heretic. Giordano Bruno was burned alive in 1600 for promoting heliocentrism, along with other beliefs the Church didn't like. Galileo was forced to recant his findings in 1633 under threat of execution, even into the 1800s. Teaching this in religious areas could get you in serious trouble. The charge was heresy against church doctrine, and the punishment was brutal. Burning at the stake was most common, but they'd also imprison you, torture you until you took it back, and destroy your research. Today it's taught to kindergartners. Back then, that scientific fact was a death sentence.